following program in the series, Common Sense Christianity, The Secret Power of Values, was produced by the Foundation of Human Understanding. As you listen with an open mind, you may discover the key to the peace of mind and joy for which you have been searching all of your life. We now join author, lecturer, and talk show host, Roy Masters.
And how many people, is there any people here in the room who have been caught up with me in any way? Could you admit it? Would you admit it? Could you admit it? You do? How many? It's not my intention, you understand.
It's nice when you finally see it.
It's nice when you find it is so, isn't it? And perhaps we should talk about that this evening. I mean, I'm open to almost any question, but I felt like it was would be sort of like a cleansing to talk about that, and also as a preventative medicine for those of you new people who should know what my heart is. And you know, strangely, the danger is, even though you hear me, you new people here for the first time, even though you actually hear me and think you understand me, you're still vulnerable. See? You may come back 3 years from now and you do all those things, start your own business, get out of the big city, you know, whatever it is that I say. And I said, well, remember that Thursday evening? Yeah, I did. I thought I understood it. You still did it anyway. I meant to go in the office. If there is somebody can go in my office and get that little, there's a clipping of the newspaper which says something about 10% of all American people are in a hypnotic state. Just a little clipping on my desk, Sid. And the two psychiatrists have been saying that. Probably they're, you know, amongst the 10%. You know, and my young man who sent me the clipping called those two scientists up and talked to them. He says, you couldn't believe it. He said, these guys are like, they're like fence posts. I couldn't talk to them. I was talking to them about what you were saying, and they couldn't understand what I was saying. I thought I had met a soulmate, someone who understood what I've been saying all these years. Now, if you want to know the truth, the actual figures for the hypnotic state that people live in is more than 10%, which happens to be, what is 25 million? Is that right? How many is 10%? Yeah. No, in the whole country. 250 million. So how much is 10% of that? Is 25 million. That's right. Maybe if I get my glasses on, my intelligence will come back. More than 10 million. There it is. Well, that was more accurate. More than 10 millions of Americans are so easily hypnotized they're actually walking around in a kind of trance which can cause serious problems, warn two respected psychiatrists who are probably living under a hypnotic state because they got a piece of paper on the wall that says they're intelligent. The psychiatrists describe these people as though get hungry at the mere sight of someone eating, feel itchy if someone scratches, listen to this, reach for a cigarette when someone lights up, constantly buys impulse items from fast-talking salesmen. At least 5% of U.S. population extraordinarily hypnotizable, said Dr. Emery Brittner, director of the Institute of Group Dynamics in Roslyn, New York, who bases his estimates on research over a 20-year career in psychiatry. A sizable segment is so easily hypnotized they are in a constant state of exaggerated suggestibility even when awake and going about their normal daily routine, he warned. They can be easily persuaded to do things afterwards they have no idea why they did them. More than 10 million Americans are stuck in this trance-like state. Do so because the way they've learned to handle life's problems. But there's a way to wake them up, he said. Take a look at your actions, admit that you fall into this category. You must learn to say no, and don't just buy a car because the salesman tells you. Check prices and performance and mileage and study what other dealers offer you before buying. And if you have a decision to make, look at the facts and ask the questions, and then start thinking to yourself, and you'll soon snap out of your trance-like state for good. And they'll read that. First of all, they don't know that they're in a trance-like state. And if they're told they're one of them, they'll do everything that this man said, in a trance-like state. So you see what the problem? See, I astounded people when I was in the army when a young man. I could do all kinds of magic tricks. I'm pretty good at sleight of hand and stuff, still am. I used to be the platoon entertainer. I had all of the soldiers cleaning my boots and blancoing my webbing, cleaning my rifle. The sergeant was completely ignored. He was very jealous. And one night, I have to tell you just a little anecdote story, that we were on fire duty called fire picket, and I hypnotized the 2 officers on duty, and nobody did any fire duty. But they wrote down the next day that there was like nothing happened as far as they was concerned. Everybody did fire duty, but I had a good night's sleep, and so did they. But they thought they were awake all night. And there are times where I got so good at what I was doing that, young men, I'll go to a dance and I'm sitting there, we're talking about such things as I'm talking to you, but not in such a sophisticated manner. And I would say to the young man, I said, look, I can hypnotize you right now without you in your waking state. And I knew who to pick out. I said, you see that glass of beer you're holding in your hand? I said, yes. I said, you can't pick it up. And I'm just talking to a guy at a bar, right? It's like in a dance place. And he looks at that and he can't pick it up. This man, I never saw him before in my life. I just asserted a fact in an overwhelming, powerful way, looked him straight in the eye, suddenly became his authority, and he reacted in that sort of childlike, to that suggestion. And it was like, as far as everybody concerned, watching and being aware of what I was doing, I was like some kind of Svengali with some kind of power. But all I was doing is demonstrating an influence which didn't take much to bring about, didn't take much energy to bring that about, which pervades all of society. Every one of us to varying degrees, every one of us, no exceptions. Even the President of the United States, subject to various pressures and influences to which we respond and act, and we act out those responses. And we never draw a same breath as long as we live. The person in that state does not know that their consciousness is altered. They do not know it, and what is even more frightening is that you cannot show them that they're under any influence. No, they're immediately in denial. There's something so frightening about that anyone could be subject to another person's will, that we're in denial about. We protect it. We protect it, meaning we protect another person's will in us, actually. We can't wake up. And so not even the person who has put them under the influence is able to make them aware that they're under the influence. So I could say to that person, but look, you're doing this because I've influenced you. I'm like a Svengali, I've just influenced you, and the reason why you've done all these things is because I made you do them. Do you see that? Now I want you to believe that. And you can make them believe that. You can actually say, well, for a while they won't believe it, and they say, oh, come on now. I said, look, you've got to believe it because I said so. I'm telling you that's the truth. Really? Oh, now that's the truth. But they don't see it. They don't see it. The part of their brain is separated from the other part of their brain. Well, it's not two brains that's involved. One is a spiritual brain, which isn't a brain at all. It's like, it is a replica of our, it's like we have two sets of eyes. We have a set of, it's like a body within a body. It's like a person within a person. And the person within a person is spiritual. So that, if you can become just objective, then you can speak to both of you. So the part of you can hear because you have ears to hear and you have a brain to interpret the noise to what it means, while the other part can understand what he hears. See? So while you can remember something and act from that memory without permission of the consciousness, see? If the consciousness was there and was free to act on that information, to choose to believe it, to reject what it's accepted. For instance, you may have believed something and you remember it and you thought it was so. But then you stood back and you said, no, that doesn't make sense, and you can reject it. Well, you have to have two parts, one acting on the other for that to happen. One to negate, one to see the truth about the other. Jesus was asked by a man because he wanted to believe in him, and he said, Lord, I believe, but help thou my unbelief. See, because what he was saying, there's two parts. You see, one part believed him and one part didn't. See? And he saw that. And he wanted to be made whole so the two parts could believe. But the trouble is, you see, there's a part of us that's shut down. And it's part of us that's in denial of God. Because once we've been influenced, there's a certain shame or guilt of allowing ourselves to be violated, because it's called sin. When we're violated, we've somehow failed. That consciousness has been a party to it to some degree, and that consciousness which has been a party to how we've been affected and acted through is guilty, and how it deals with guilt is, as pride usually does, it shuts down that which could show how wrong it is, and so we're in denial. And so therefore this brain of ours is left open, like the circuits are open into the world, and we are influenced by the world around us. See? One person come along and influence us, and we can be their friend, and then another person come along, and pretty soon we're not that person's friend, we're that person's enemy and this person's friend. You can see that happening in the Persian Gulf, you know. Iran suddenly will take the side of Saddam Hussein. They've been fighting that Saddam Hussein was their worst enemy for 8 years. But they hate America more, so the tendency is to side with Saddam Hussein. You see? The influence is, it's a sickness, and there's no consciousness there of the insanity of what's going on, that we're getting into bed with somebody that's going to kill you. But never mind, you hate this person more and you need support. You need support for that hate. See, you're driven differently. And so this is a very important point, and I don't want to spend the whole evening. There's a tendency for me now, since I'm on a roll a little bit, to sort of talk all evening and not give you people a chance to, to voice some objections, or ask for some clarification, or identify with what I'm saying. Yes,
every day, you go out and you got to face this mean world.
It's mean.
And it's just not simple to face it. You want to speak up.
Well, let me ask you, is it the way I show you, is it simpler to simply not hate the world and face it, or is it easier to hate the world and not face it? I mean, you've already tried hating the world and not facing it, and licking but you can't, joining what you can't lick. You found that easy or found that hard? That's what you're crying, isn't it about? Is it because
I find it hard not to just hate, because
say that again.
I have a lot of hate in me, and I don't want it.
Don't you see
How do I get him out?
Well,
I try to meditate and listen to you, and I know that I've put you on a pedestal, and I know that's wrong.
I see. That's the reason why. Look, I appreciate your honesty. Do you see that you are what I've been talking about this evening?
Yes.
And that instead of being caught up with, if I may use the term, yourself, your God self, your Christ self, instead of standing back and becoming identified, enveloped in His Spirit, which is a very mystical thing. It's I don't think I could write what that means down on paper. The best I can do is sort of give it some kind of high-sounding name. But I tell you that if your soul is pure, now when I'm saying it's pure in the sense that you really want to find the purpose for which you were created, you've heard me say this before, and in that to serve it, to be the vehicle of what you were created for, and not to give up the sense of I am, to give up the sense of the selfish preservation of your ego, your own selfish existence. When you're ready to do that, only then are you ready to experience that other side, that other half of you that comes into play, which is called enlightenment, fulfillment, understanding, love. Only then are those forces released in you to neutralize the horrible effects of the world around you. You see, because you stand between two worlds, and the I-ness, and if you know what I mean by the I-ness, the me, the selfish me, that
needy.
Yes, that hungry, selfish, greedy, self-seeking, self-fulfilling ego. The I separated from the I am, as if it was an I am itself. You know what I mean? See, that's what that separation, the I separated from the I am, which is a union with a God, trying to be its own God, above everything, beneath nothing, becomes subject to everything. It becomes vulnerable to all of the suggestions and all of the influences of life. And slowly but surely our mind gets opened up and you get taken over and you get eaten away. You're hypnotized and confused. You become confused. You don't know where you're coming or going. You think you're doing right and it's wrong. And it'll always be that way until you have that extra edge, that consciousness which is, well, a young man was talking to me this evening, and I have to, he's the cameraman as a matter of fact, and I have to may I talk about your experience? You want to talk about your experience on the commode? Yeah, I think, would you step forward, because the camera's on me anyway, so we don't need you anyway. Would you step forward and explain, come into the limelight and tell me what happened on that commode that day? Yeah. Yeah.
Can you just talk from here?
Yeah.
Well, I was telling Mr. Masters that must have been when I was about 15 years old, and I was sitting on the commode. Sounds kind of gross, right?
Some of the greatest ideas happened to you.
Right. And I was going through the usual urban problems that a lot of young people go through when you live in inner city. I had a dad who was an alcoholic, and home was out of control. And I was kind of in the streets. I had been involved, with drinking and cigarettes, smoking, and all this kind of stuff. So there was another part of me that was searching, for something to get away from these problems. And this particular day, when I was sitting on the commode, I started staring at my hands, and I would start repeating to myself, well, these are my hands, and this is my body, but my body's not me. And I don't know what made me start saying that, but all of a sudden, there was some distance that was placed in between my body and my inner person. And it shocked me. I mean, it made me afraid. I didn't know what it was. And so I guess I went back into, the flesh-based self. But
it frightened him, see?
Yeah, it frightened me. And several years later, in my middle 30s, I guess it was, I started listening to Mr. Masters on the radio, and I began to hear him talk about this same type of experience. And in fact, that's what reminded me that happened to me at age 50.
In other words, I reminded you of a commode.
That's yeah.
Every time he sees me, he sees a commode.
Right. And well, that was the basic experience.
Thank you.
There's a lot of stuff tied to that. But
But see, his life
basically-
changed once he
yeah.
got to that objective state back, where one part could act on the other and neutralize any negative influence by the mere observation of it, so that one could disagree with the other because there was a presence of disagreement or agreement, where everything which is heard, if agreeable, is not necessarily, it transforms the, what you, for instance, if you hear something for this evening from me, and you are transported into the the objective state. If you're just transported into that objective state, then it will happen that whatever you hear from me or anyone else, if it is true, that you perceive it to be true, you could act on it without it being a robotic thing. It could still be your own experience. It could still be that you agree with what you've heard, because it's awakened you to a parallel knowledge of what it's all about. And having heard it, and heard the truth of it, and appreciating the truth, having lost sight of it perhaps, or hearing it better, more clarified from another human being's time-space continuum, see? His reference in his place in time and space. Agreeing with it, acting on it, or disagreeing and discarding it, you remain a whole person. You would not be acting out of that person's suggestion, but you would still be acting out of your own appreciation of what he's made you realize. And it's perfectly original in that form. See the difference? But the trouble is when people listen to me and they start to realize, becoming objective, and they start to see that their influences in their life, they also start to see me as an influence in that life, and they start to see that even though they're listening to me, they start to see their body acting and reacting to me, even though they're objective, even though they've got to this objective state, but they start to see me as one of those people that's doing that to them. And they miss that very delicate moment, see? And they start rebelling or resenting me because I am no different from everyone that I'm talking about. Therefore, they start to judge me about that. Has anybody ever done that? You have you? Oh, good. Well, I'm glad you see it. Yes, sir.
I think this has something to do with what you're talking about. One day you were talking over the radio station, and you had said that if I have helped you, then help me. You're talking about giving donation, and it had made so much sense, and it like rung a bell to me. I said, yeah, he has helped me. So why shouldn't I give? Because I would never give a donation. And I started giving $5, and then as I started making more money, I started giving more money. But is that the type of thing that you're talking about?
Well, the question is, you have to ascertain whether the good idea that it was.
No, it was like a ring, a bell. Like.
Did you agree? But the point is, did you agree with it? Have you not felt guilt? Did you feel good for giving?
No.
Good. Because if you felt good
for giving, it just made sense. It just made sense.
Just because it makes sense.
Yeah, it just made sense.
And the sense of it moves you. The sense is the goodness of it.
Truth.
And it's the truth.
It just made sense.
The truth moves through you, and it doesn't. And it moves through you in the absence of any emotionalism that might impede it and make it revert and make you act because you reacted, because it makes you act because you're suggestible. It is very important that you learn or discover or recognize the distinction between your suggestibility, the hearing and being suggestible, because we are all suggestible. Because when we don't have this other mind, when we are children, we are so traumatized as to lose this other side of ourselves for a while. What a better way of saying it, because I could say it more accurately than that, but it would take too long.
Exactly.
So if you were violated with a person with white tennis shoes, then that's a situation which not dealt with properly. As you go through older in life, you would react in a predictable way to a person wearing tennis shoes, or just a pair of tennis shoes sitting in someone's closet. It would reactivate the behavior. You would not know or not be conscious that your behavior is coming out of a pair of tennis shoes. And you know how kids are today. They get their identity from tennis shoes, believe it or not. It's not so funny. I thought that was a funny thing, but they'll even kill for a pair of tennis shoes because their identity is somehow, and their behavior is somehow locked into the conditioning and reinforcement of a pair of tennis shoes. Excuse me if I take it just a little too far.
Yeah.
But
well, I was going to give you a true example of what I was going to
yeah, but I wanted to finish off the thought, if you don't mind.
Okay, go for it.
Because it's an important thought. You've got me going on a roll here.
Okay.
Overwhelming swine, aren't I? But do you see? But once you become objective, once the mind comes into existence again, or once the mind, the conscious mind, which is sort of fused to the flesh, to the senses, and therefore is not able to observe its own idiosyncrasies, and is not able to observe its own behavior, but thinks its own behavior, the behavior that it has reacting to tennis shoes, is its own behavior. It doesn't notice the tennis shoes are always whatever happens to be tripping him as he goes through life. It isn't tennis shoes, it's the local bar, the local whore, is somebody's tone of somebody's voice. See, there's thousands of things in our environment that have a predictable effect on us which we're not conscious of. And it keeps us, for instance, a Mexican, excuse me putting it this way, I don't know why I'm picked on Mexicans, but you know, every time, whoop, he's a Mexican, right? And every time he every time he passes a burrito place, the Mexican in him is reinforced. He doesn't know eating a burrito is reinforcing everything he is, and he cannot be anything different because of the burrito. See? Now, not being a Mexican, might have I'm an Englishman, but I am being reinforced by my bowler hat. That's how I get my identity, and I even get who I am from my own voice. I say, hello, darling. You see, and they get their reinforcement by responding, you know, making the acceptable noises. You go in the ghetto, and they also make those funny noises. Hey, man. You know. Yeah, they all talk funny, and they get their reinforcement, and they can't get out of it because they don't realize that they're reinforcing each other's identities, and they cannot get out of who they are, and they die in it. And they're reinforcing their behaviors, but they're also, at the same time, they're reinforcing the denial of those behaviors. For every reinforcement of a behavior is a dulling effect on reality. When you reinforce something, when you take a drink, you're reinforcing behavior, but also you're dulling the same time while it's reinforcing you, it's hypnotizing you, it's dulling you to what's happening to you. See? So you go through life, and you come home from a hard day's work, you put the music on. You get up in the morning, I see my wife. I don't drink tea and I don't drink coffee anymore. I've got rid of all that stuff. I see her. There's the coffee beans going. Every morning. She's sort of stumbling around in the dark. She says, that smell, she can't stop. I said, look, your teeth are dissolving into the coffee. Look at them. You got two teeth left in the front, and you're still dissolving it. I said, don't you realize you're reinforcing all of your crazy... This cup of coffee is more than a cup of coffee. It's who you are. You know you can't get moving because you have to have your coffee for the day. What does that mean? You've got to get your behavior reinforcement. You see? Because it's connecting you to your God. It's connecting to you to some influence because, well, coffee was in the present. When you grew up, you came up from a violent home. And everybody drank black coffee all day long. They smoked and they drank and they black. Well, that black coffee is in the presence of that experience. And see, and so that it's where your behavior was being molded, and that black coffee is what is needed to revive who you are. Because if you don't have the black coffee, if you if you forbear to brew it for yourself and imbibe the aroma. It's like a fix, right? It's exactly the same thing, except it's legal. It's exactly the same thing. If you don't do that, if you start giving up all those things which are familiar to you, a terrible thing start to happen. You start to wake up. The consciousness which is sort of fused to the flesh, sort of identified with the animal, borrowing in the feeling self, taking security in the feeling self, that are awakened by those reinforcements, starts to be released from the flesh, from being glued, fused to the flesh, and you start realizing truth. And that's very painful. Now, you see, until you're ready, this truth, this consciousness through which truth shines like a light through a lens. It shines on what you've become and starts to dissolve you. And this dissolving is like dying, it's painful. And therefore, to the ego animal self, the earthy animal self, this is a very, it's a threat. It's danger. We feel like we're dying, you see. And I tell you that you must go through that. But the problem is you have these great needs to find heroics, to find meaning in existence. You know that's the driving force. That's why you listen to my program. That's why you visit me here. At the same time, the very person who could help you get to where you say you want to go, what you do is you transform me into the likeness of everything else. I become the substitute coffee, the substitute smell, the look in my eyes, the smile. You involve yourself with me and my teachings, and you see, it's a facsimile. Okay. Question.
For a long time, I was discovering things, and I'm having a problem now with my daughters because here, in the relationship that I've had with my wife and so forth, so I finally, found out how to relate and how to properly love her.
What kind of trouble are you having with daughters? As if I didn't know.
It's a problem of how they relate to other men, and here I don't want to try to control them, but yet I want to guide them and show them, show them that, hey, don't be hypnotized by the rest of the world because, like I've seen them when they go out.
But
and
they can't hear you. The worldly hypnosis is stronger than you are.
Yeah, it must be because I went to
Because if you're of the world like the world is, and before the time of awakening you are of the world like the world is.
And that's what I was.
Not only are you an example of what the world is, so you set them up for the world, right?
I did.
But then when you try to influence them, to counter-influence the world, they see your influence. They see the effort of it, where the world is so effortless in its influence. It's like a man gets caught up with a son gets caught up with his girlfriend, and the mom sees, because she knows what women are like, she knows what the girl is up to, the boy doesn't. But the girl's got an effortless, access to this boy's mind.
Yes.
But mom doesn't have the same influence. Mom's losing her power to this other woman. She doesn't have the same powers. She only had it for her husband, right? She can't use it here. Now she starts to use a little effort. Oh, can't you see what this woman is doing to you? The boy sees the influence, but he doesn't see the influence of the girl. And who do you think? It only drives the boy to the girl, right?
Yeah.
Now, what do you have to have in order to be a counter-influence to the influence? It's got to be the influence of no influence.
No influence?
You see, because if it's the influence of influence, that's what's wrong with the world. The world is influencing.
That's what I struggle so hard because here as a parent, like I said, I know I've done a lot of wrong because I'm a very strong person, I have a lot of anger that comes out and so forth.
That's not strength, though.
That's true. I mean, that's the wrong kind of strength. And I know that I've, tried to guide them in a real, tight-fisted type of way. And now that I realize what I've done, I want to draw back, but yet I want them.
See, it's a tough situation.
I want to know where can I stand as a parent and say, okay, this is where I draw the line. because I'm living in a family with 3 women, and they're very strong-willed, you know. And here I'm battling, trying to.
One day he's still
The war.
alive. I was looking at your body shape. It just did seem to suffer. So.
Yeah. So that's that's the thing that I'm struggling with. Is where can I draw?
Well, look, I can only answer you in a generality, but it's a very powerful one, and that is that I can only point to my own experience. I have one daughter, and my daughter has such love for me. And she, at one time she thought I was going to die, a few years ago, and she was all broken up about it. I said, look, Diane, you've got to let me go, right? Now, don't you see that you have a husband now, and he has to finish off the work I began, and he's a good man, and you have to work out your problems with him. But if you do that, you see, and I see you all broken up, and wherever I'm going to be very disturbed about that. You've got to let it go. So I've helped to let her go, but she was a little bit caught up with her dad, and then there comes this maturing, this experience where she thought she was going to lose me, and now she has sort of gone beyond that. But the thing is about, but the point I'm going to try to make here is that my daughter has such perfect love for me that if I was to say to her, to the man she was going to marry that she loved, don't marry that man because he's not right for you, she'd drop him like a hot potato because she'd believe me. Because she's always known that I've always saved her from herself and from wrong influences, including mom. Saved her sanity. And I've never failed her. And that I've always had the best interest in her heart, and I've always tried to guide her to that and to herself. And so therefore there's a bond between us that is not hypnotic. Somewhat, because there's this father-child relationship, but that dissolves. But there still leaves this other, to know that I would not, that she could actually trust my perception when she can't trust, when she doesn't know for sure herself. Although for the most part, she doesn't call me about things because she's a very strong-minded person and sees things for herself, which I brought up to be. But on those conditions where there's these influences, I could step in and say something and it would count, but it would count without effort because of that unbroken bond of fidelity. So I've never failed her. No, I mean never failed her.
And that's where I have failed them, and I know that I don't have the full trust.
But then you have a failing self that is influenced by the world. See, and therefore it can't counter-influence the world. Don't you see that? That's why it's so important for you all to be, if you'll pardon the way I put it, perfect. I mean, being of perfect accord, being of perfect intent. That's perfect enough. Because children can see your intent. If your intent is pure, they can see through your weaknesses. I've known women whose fathers were alcoholics, driven to be alcoholics by their crazy women, because they just didn't know how. They weren't skilled in dealing with what, the Saddam Hussein in their life. They just were decent men, and they just didn't know, they weren't trained in dealing with it. The decency is still in there. And even though the man comes home drunk at night and swears and rants and raves, the little girl looks at this and sees that Dad is in trouble and can't help himself. He doesn't know what he's up, he doesn't know how to deal with it. Her perception, her awareness, her love of God, actually, the truth, her own love of God has given her perception. And she sees through it all. She sees that her mother setting up her father for this and has love for her father. That's what saves her. Now the father, even though he's a drunk, see, and now she's getting caught up with something, and the father will come up and say, look, daughter, I know I haven't really been a good father, but I wish you wouldn't go out with this guy or do this or do that. She loved that. She's not relating to the drunk, she's not relating to anything else, she's relating to the purity of his spirit that is kind of lost, but see what I'm saying? Even under those conditions it will work. What I'm saying is that's what you've got to have. In order to be, you've got to bring another world. You have to bring another world to bear on this world through you. That's what I'm trying to lead you into in my teaching, to bring this other world into the world through you, and not me superimpose my world on you. I can't give that to you. I can't give you what I've got. and some of you are envious, and some of you are so envious and so egotistical as to be jealous of what I have, or jealous of my kids being my kids. You see what I mean? And then to covet that, and to want a piece of me. And when I don't give you a piece, you know, you would have secret resentments. You can't take it from another human being. Don't you see that? The gentleman back there.
Who can judge true, or who can judge right or wrong, if what you believe is the only truth that you follow?
Say, explain that again. Would you try?
Who can judge right and wrong, if what you believe is the the only truth that you follow? Yeah.
Help me with that one.
I mean, who can judge what is right or wrong? You know what I'm saying?
How can you judge right and wrong?
Yeah, who can judge? Who can judge Saddam Hussein? He said what he said he think he believe is right.
Yeah.
And we see it wrong.
Well,
and over there they see us wrong over here.
Well, you have to understand that. I mean, if there is a right and a wrong, right, which you are saying that there was a right and a wrong, there was a good and an evil. There are two extremes. The wrong thinks he's right, but he's wrong. See? And the wrong thinks the right is wrong. He thinks the evil is the right person. And he thinks the good is the wicked person. He doesn't see himself as wicked.
But so who sees him?
Okay. So what we do, what we have is a war of worlds. We do have a war of worlds, where there are wicked people who see evil as good, and they see good as evil. The Bible, Scripture talks about that. Now, when you ask me the question, who's to say? Well, I am to say, and Saddam Hussein does his thing. He asserts a wrong for a right, and he thinks my right is wrong, and he comes to war with me. Now, I can either join him because he's so strong and he's wrong that I could think that I was wrong and give up my right and join his wrong and think I'm right, like someone. I mean, like there's a whole bunch of confused. There's 17 million of them over there, right? So, and it happens every day in every household. It happens every day. This is Saddam Hussein who confused the living crap out of everybody.
But if it's somebody like ethnocentric, he just believe what that person believes is the only right way.
Well, now I'm coming to that.
If I believe killing is good, that's what I believe.
I know.
Despite what other people think.
Well,
So who can judge me?
Who lives by the sword will die by the sword, and I'm the one that's going to kill him. If you got the point. In other words, this is where the heroics comes in. This is where the wrong people who think they're right, and they have the power and the intelligence to impose their right upon you and try to convert you and confuse you and destroy your innocence and make you part of their system, like Saddam Hussein. As a perfect example. We have Saddam Husseins in marriage, we have Saddam Husseins in government, we have Saddam Husseins in the church, you have Saddam Husseins with your friends. You see, we have Saddam Husseins everywhere, and you have leaders and followers. And on two extremes you have Saddam Husseins who are really evil, and you have a lot of people and people who are like good people, like Colin Powell, not Colin Powell, everybody calls him Colin Powell. Colin Powell. And then General Schwarzkopf. These two people are just noble souls. I mean, it's all over their face, especially Colin Powell. For me, he'd be the first black president. I'd vote for him any day. I see where he's coming from. His countenance shows it. See? He shines. And Schwarzkopf is, he also talked about an out-of-body experience. Remember that? When he says, he said, well, a reporter asked him, how did he experience danger when he was in the Marines or when he was in the Army? He said, I hate to tell you this, but it sounds crazy, but it was like an out-of-body experience. I felt like it wasn't happening to me. Understand, we're talking about a man who's becoming ejective under stress, so that the spirit moves through him and not him move, not any other element moving through him. He's not responding ego for ego. It's divine ego against not so divine egos. And he's out of the way and something's acting through him, and he can't understand how he comes out of it in one piece victorious because it was the divine that was acting through him. And I'm saying to you that there are these two forces in the world, the evil that have a consciousness of sorts that's reverse. They're called sociopaths or psychopaths. They have no conscience. As a matter of fact, if they don't kill you, and if they don't put their cigarette out in your eyeball, see, they had a bad day. See? They derive their power from terrifying and confusing torture. They derive life from other people's death. And they have a dark power that guides their lives. And they're points of darkness. And they're able to intimidate large numbers of people, even though the large numbers of people are not sociopaths or psychopaths. They are the arms, the extensions of the sociopaths and psychopaths, the evils of the world. And some of them will be destroyed, and some of them are used in armies, and some are used to destroy the innocence of others, and eventually are destroyed themselves. And some of them, well, they change sides, they wake up. You know, I was a Saddam Hussein bodyguard. I just didn't want to do that anymore. I couldn't stand to see that. I saw him for what he was, and I came over to America. I was a Nazi. I was a Nazi camp commander, and I woke up and realized what I was doing. I was an abortionist. I was a doctor. I had 20,000 abortions I did, and I thought I was doing the right thing. And then one day my daughter, you know, got run over, and I realized the preciousness of life. And suddenly they woke up from the hypnotic trance, and I'm trying to get. I was a leader. I got people to get abortions. I was able to persuade them to do the wrong thing if it was the right thing. And now I'm trying to talk to these same people and they can't hear me. You see that in other words, there are people who are not sociopaths or but they're caught up for a while in the system, and they're used as an instrument of evil, and they do wake up. And sometimes people from the good change to the bad, and sometimes the bad change to the good. There's a great gulf of people in between the good and the evil, but there is a good and there is an evil, and then you choose your side. And let's hope you choose right.
Yeah, so
because who's to say, but you're to say.
So that's mean that there is not a God, there's not an outside conscience that can judge you. Only another man. That's what you're saying, right?
Pardon? No, you have.
I'm talking about.
Let me tell you something. I do not know the mystery of it. Cannot explain this mystery. It is a great, great mystery. But there are some people who love what's right. They're looking for the purpose for which they're created. They're looking for the truth, and these people are attracted to the truth, and it's a gift. They don't understand. A lot of you people are gifted beyond your wildest imaginations. You do not know. You are not conscious. Well, I say you're conscious, but you're not fully. You're not fully aware or appreciative of what you have that sets you apart from all the evil in the world, that enables you to see evil as evil. See? Because a lot of people are walking around in a trance. And you can see them walking around in a trance. As you get more and more and more aware and more conscious, and as you're more committed to do the right thing, and you stand up for what's right, and you give up your little habits, and your consciousness becomes freer and freer, and you see clearer and clearer. As I get older, I mean, if I could be scared, I'd be scared to death to see what I'm seeing around me in America. It's overwhelming. It's no wonder people want to shut up and go to sleep, and then if you can't lick them, you join them. You stay asleep with all of those who are asleep, and you go through life, friends of the enemy, dying. But as you become aware, you must have had it since you were a child, and lost it and gained it and lost it, but now have found it more permanently. You have this gift that if you will stay the course, you will find that eternal life. You will find a magic existence beyond any possible description. And you will see that you will have to go, will have to go to war. You will become, because of your consciousness, you will become so set apart by virtue of this distance you have, people will feel themselves watched. You see? They suddenly, you're not like them anymore. Something's happened to you, and there's a new spirit operating through you, looking at the spirit operating through them. warfare. Instant warfare. Now the warfare is, can you bring some people over to your side? Can you bear the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune? Can you bear their cruelty and their twisting of truth? Can you bear their slander and their lies and their cheating? Huh? Can you bear the insults and the injury without hating them? And can you develop that strength which that experience is designed to be a foil? Can you? Because if you do, strange things begin to happen. Just because of that, the influence of no influence. Remember, they couldn't influence you, but you didn't have to influence back because you didn't have to. You used to have to because you had to out-influence a person. But the secret is to influence but no influence. And when they find they can't influence you, they come face to face in a power greater than both of you. Their God, see, is no match for your God. And they're terrified, frightened. A lot of people are frightened of Roy Masters. See, you know that a lot of people are afraid of me. But I'm not a terrifying person. The only thing that's afraid is the wickedness that's in them. See, that's the only thing that's afraid. Or they see themselves by that, and they see what they've never seen before, and they begin to appreciate where you're coming from and want to come from the same place. They want to go. You awaken in them to rekindle the desire to want what you have, and they bring them over to your side. And this is how the war is fought. Sometimes the war is fought with weapons of real war, which we are seeing now. But still, you'll see those who are Saddam Hussein oriented, so that when the evil rises in a different country, they are attracted to it to give it their first loyalty. And they see the enemy as their friend and their friends as their enemy, their own countrymen. See that? Now the mystery of it, the mystery of who gravitates where, who polarizes to what, the evil is the good, and the good is the good is the good. How that is so is a blessing. You either got it or you ain't. It's marked in you from birth. You can't give it to yourself. It lays there dormant. Through all your suffering is what stirs you to seek it. See? Or not seek it. See? The guilt piles up, and it piles up in such a way is that you don't want to live your life with this guilt, that you want to find the truth to take away that guilt. You want to find something to take away the guilt. But which something takes away the guilt has to do with the inclination of your soul. Do you take refuge in the enemy? or seek the refuge from the enemy, but you know not where it is. And that yearning, that hungering and thirsting after righteousness is what Jesus was talking about. Seek and ye shall find. Yearn and you shall find. Yes. Well, this lady here.
A long time ago, you told me, I called you, I was a little younger, and you said, that's okay. You know, you said basically, I'll be your dad then, and you told me to
surrogate.
stop. Right, you told me to stop doing some things. So, I mean, is it okay to come to you and ask you as if I was going to, because I don't have my father, and
right.
If he was here, he probably wouldn't know how to answer anyway, but to ask you if I'm doing it right, like meditation, am I being objective?
I can't.
I don't know if I'm doing it right.
But I'm not able to answer those questions. You will have to realize those things for yourself. I've given you a very good talk this evening, I thought, a fairly decent talk this evening, on a very important subject, and that you must discern all things for yourself. And I tell you this, if you're doing it wrong, you'll see that it's wrong. Because if it's in your heart to want to know the truth, eventually, anything that is acting through you, anything you're doing which is not in concert with reality, that's not in sync with reality, makes you self-conscious of it sooner or later. I tell you this, I've told my wife this evening, I said, we were talking about this over dinner, and I said, now, Anne, don't you see, I'm talking to this gentleman about how the likes of us, because we live in this world of awareness, and we can see the timing. We can see whether a person is faking or not faking, because he may do the right thing, but he may do it 2 seconds too soon or 2 seconds too late. or not at all when he should have done it. And if a person of grace knows and recognizes another person of grace, we both know where we're coming. You might say there's a computer chip in our brain that recognizes a computer chip that knows what a computer chip in another person is supposed to do, but although we don't lay it on you and say you're supposed to do it, this is the extra you're supposed to do, but it's the extra they offer, that the extra we would offer, and we see the graciousness. But all we see it as pretense to get our confidence. See the difference? So I can't tell you. Anything that is not perfectly true, anything you're not doing right, wait. You'll be conscious of it. Don't be in a hurry. You've got your whole life ahead of you. And as long as you're sincere, listen, as long as you're seeking sincerely, nothing will happen to you. You'll have the life you need. See? Wisdom is the length of your days. Don't worry, nothing's going to happen to you. I know you're afraid of dying and all. Something might happen to you before you find the truth. Is that right? All that sort of stuff goes on in your little brain, doesn't it? Something like that.
I guess because I'm learning how to, I'm trying to meditate and...
Don't try too hard.
Right, and I think that's where my problem is. And
you see,
and as I'm
you said it yourself.
Right, and I think as I'm driving and I'm driving in my car, you know, I also try to, like, sometimes I'll stop and I'll try to just feel myself being still, and then sometimes and all of a sudden I caught up in this big daydream, and I'm like, whoa, what happened?
But you see, the problem is trying too hard. Did I ever ask you to try? Yeah, that's your problem is trying. Trying always involves ego. Let go, let God. The less you try, the more quiet, the more relaxed you are, the less you have your own will and effort in anything, the more things will be as they ought to be, perfectly natural. See, that's the lesson you're going to learn. Let go, let go, let go. Don't worry. It'll be all right. Don't try to know. You'll know.
So don't get involved, like a lot of times.
Just
watch everything.
That's your whole job. This is your assignment. Where's that music? See, burn the tape when you finish with it, right? This is your assignment. Your assignment is just watch the degree to which your ego is involved with struggle and resentment, and just every time you see it, relax, step back. You see yourself worrying, know that you can never solve anything by worry. Step back. Step back and let the light, your consciousness acts like a lens for the light, so the light becomes a very strong, cogent force. See? I hope that's understood.
And the self disappears.
And the self, actually, this ego self disappears, and the new self emerges. So that's called being born again. Yeah.